There is a fifth dimension, beyond that which is known to man.
A dimension of sound.
For the 150th time, you are not getting out of here. Please let me finish the Count of Monte Cristo.
A dimension of sight.
No change at all.
What? I think I look fine.
A dimension of mind.
Next stop, the Twilight Zone.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome to the Fifth Dimension, a Twilight Zone podcast. I am back as your host, Nick Lapola, and I'm here with Triv. How you doing, Triv?
Not doing too bad. I'm feeling quite heavenly today, if I'm being honest.
I know you look like you may have some kind of glow, maybe a little bit of halo-ness to you.
I am not pregnant. There's no glow here.
Okay, we'll go with you have a ring around your. I don't know where to go with that.
I don't know, and I feel like I should leave now.
As I walk away through the spinning swirls of the vortex. So we are back for the second episode, which is season 1, episode 2, One for the Angels. So we're in our second episode. Hopefully it'll be a little bit better than the first episode, which was a complete fall off the cliff type of episode because it was our first episode period. But overall, how do you feel about the first episode? How do you feel about, coming into the second episode, talking about more Twilight Zone? How was your overall opinion of how we accomplished the first episode?
Well, we proved that we're both quite tangent driven, and I think Jacob Anders would be proud of us for the amount of tangents we went on.
Well, we'll find out in a couple weeks. So
woohoo!
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Oh yeah. Well, maybe he may go. You guys suck. I'm not ever talking to you again. Let me go talk about the Candyman. So.
Also good.
Exactly.
That in itself could be some kind of a Twilight Zone episode, if we're being honest.
That's true. I mean, a lot of horror action. Nia
LaCosta directed, but Jordan Peele produced. You got the Twilight Zone connection there. So
that's true. Very true. And if you think about horror in general, if you kind of break it down, horror in its own right is kind of like the Twilight Zone. There's a really kind of crazy scenario with a very crazy character, a very odd presentation, and usually a ending that doesn't fit up with the norm when it comes to filmmaking. So
I like it. That's why we like the Twilight Zone.
Exactly. And that's kind of like your last video you just posted of the stuff.
Yes. Things get weird quick.
Exactly. So it's been a pretty crazy week. You just posted a new video as of this recording. By the time this video gets posted, your video will be like a week old, but it was one of those things where it's easy to record like a week in advance. So in case anything comes up, like, Twilight Zone-esque, or, I go off the rails and kind of lose my sanity. We just have a week to get back into our rightful moods, but
or if I get flooded by the stuff randomly, which you never know might happen.
Isn't that what the halo is? It's actually just the stuff coming out of your head there, out of your hair.
I feel like it might be, or maybe like I really don't know. I'm going with I got flooded and then taken over by the stuff, and this is all that's left of me is the halo.
Exactly. Now, with that said, I've had an interesting week. I was in the shower, had a little slip and fall, hurt my ankle pretty bad. That was fun. That's just on the Twilight Zone episode there. How's Nick gonna ruin his ankle this week? Yeah, kids, don't hurt your ankle. But by the time this video posts, I'll have posted 1,000 YouTube videos, which is pretty crazy, including this Twilight Zone podcast.
Well, congratulations. That's a massive accomplishment. Like you're like 10 times what I am, man. I'm not sure how to feel about that.
Or I'm just like lost so much time not sleeping that no wonder why I fall in the tub and hurt my ankle because I'm too busy doing YouTube videos. So
you need to get those like sticky pad things, get it in the shape of a swirly thing like the Twilight Zone.
I need to do something. How about getting a pad to put down there, like the non-slip like thing that your grandmother gets, when you were young. Anyways,
well, speaking of, you were able to get back up, and so you had one, the angels were on your side, maybe.
Exactly. And so after the first episode of actually, let me rephrase it. Let me go back a second. So with that said, our podcast, as you can tell, is usually about the Twilight Zone. It's about the original OG series. We'll go week by week talking about each episode. Maybe take a break here or there if like Christmas or something like that. If we celebrate the holiday. But with that said, we are into the second episode of the first season, and this is an episode that is more on par to me personally with what Twilight Zone will eventually become, which is a structured narrative, a structured closing narrative, a plot that feels right in line with what Rod Serling would do later on in his series, and is an episode that not only was better position, better narrated, better well written, I guess, that it felt like a overall better episode. But with that said, this was an episode that you were really looking forward to because you said you really enjoyed this episode the last week when we talked, right?
Oh yeah, it's one of my faves. I am a big fan. Like you can do, the Last Man on Earth level ones and things like that, but I don't know, not that this is a more down to earth story by any stretch, but just it feels a little bit more complex, even though it's not. The ones that kind of pull at your heartstrings and the quirky and funny ones are always kind of my faves.
It's an episode that really shows the kind of somber / lighthearted nature of what some of the things that Rod Serling could do as a writer, because sometimes he would go very heavy-handed on his stories, but sometimes he would take like a game of pool or something like that and he would turn it into a story about a guy that learns his lesson but has a chance to become something better or prove his worth, I guess you could say, which is what this episode in the end is all about, is a guy who never really had a chance to prove his worth and he was always loved, but he finally gets that chance when he gets to do the ultimate pitch later on in the story. So
very much so. And the like episodes like this, and if you've ever seen the show Scrubs, it's really funny, and then it has kind of the emotional gut punch at the end. This is kind of not that this is like it's not a gut punch per se, but it does have that emotional resonance that goes a little deeper than just the guy steps on his glasses and can't read any books because terrible things that happen. So
that is an episode that I am really looking forward to talking about, and is only like I think it's the first season, episode 8.
Nice.
Boy howdy, that is a devastating ending to that episode. So
it is very much.
But this episode, yeah, I just wanted to read. That's all I wanted in my life. Oh man. So One for the Angels, like I said, season 1, episode 2, it premiered on October 9th, 1959, a week later. Once again, directed by Robert Parrish. This actually was the first episode written, directed by Oh, I'm sorry. This time, no. The first episode was directed by Robert Stevens. This one was directed by Robert Parrish. Written once again by Rod Serling, who will do most of the episodes in his entire run of the Twilight Zone. Shot by George T. Clemens, and stars Ed Wynn as Lou, Maury Hamilton as Mr. Death. We'll talk about that in a second, and Dana Dillaway as Maggie, who's that young kid that we see in the episode. So you said you had some trivia on this episode?
Yeah, so it was specifically written for Ed Wynn because Rod Serling considered him a friend. But it was supposed to be done by like a fast talking pitchman, but the way that Ed Wynn spoke was more slow and deliberate. So they kind of played it a different way to make it work, but it worked all the same pretty well, I think. So Mr. Death notes that Ed Wynn's parents were born in Detroit and Syracuse. And those were actually the hometown of Rod Serling's parents.
Right.
And this, Where Is Everybody was based on a previously, like it was done under a different name previously. So he rewrote it to be the way that it was for Ed Wynn. Before that, it was kind of the same basic idea, but it was done from the perspective of a pair of hitmen instead of, like an old pitchman and then his, a young girl that he, that likes him. So
yeah, the one thing that was really interesting about the episode, and we'll get into the actual meat and potatoes of it, is how kids are used in most of the episodes. Sometimes you have them as Helions who are, able to control and do things like in that, what was that young kid episode where
Oh yeah, Bill Muni or MUN Muni. Bill Muni.
The problem child
Yes.
basically. And a lot of them are like these where they show kind of the sweet natured look into somebody like an Edwin character, the Lou character, who really loved the kids around him, who give toys, similar to like the Robbie the robot from Lost in Space.
Yep.
It's really kind of heartbreaking, like what happens to her and what Mr. Death, is going to do. But it was nice to see her kind of pull through in the end, I guess you could say. But
I do have thoughts on that part, but when we get down to analysis, I'll talk a little bit more about that. So
it actually says Mr. Death actually appears in season 3.
Oh, nice. Well, the Twilight Zone is not immune to death, just like any other place isn't.
That's the truth. There's a lot of that going on in these episodes. Sometimes it's funny how he's willing to go sweet and saccharine and then go straight into the hardcore, violent people destroying and killing each other. Sometimes I wonder what day Rod Serling was smoking too many cigarettes.
Well, death can be molded to fit a narrative, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. When I was watching those behind the attractions videos, the one thing about like really creative people is they smoked a lot of cigarettes, and they
probably special cigarettes too.
Maybe so. If you've ever seen Mad Men, you know what kind of cigarettes they were smoking. So
yes, the good kind.
Exactly. So One for the Angels starts out with, of course, the opening narration it's written by and narrated by Rod Serling. And what's really cool is, I don't know if he does this later on, but what's really cool is he starts the narration out with a script style opening where he's like street scene or interior, exterior, street scene, summer, the present, or 1959 present, or whatever you want to say. And he basically says, man on a sidewalk named Lou Bookman, age 60-ish. We actually find out he was born, he was like 65 or whatever. Occupation, pitchman, which becomes important. Lou Bookman, a fixture of the summer, a rather minor component to a hot July, a nondescript commonplace little man whose life is a treadmill built out of sidewalks. And in just a moment, Lou Bookman will have to concern himself with survival because as of 3 o'clock this hot July afternoon, he'll be stalked by percussion's Mr. Death.
Dum, dum, dum.
So, so what makes it really interesting is the whole setup here and the fact that we give Mr. Death, or Death himself, a persona similar to Joe Black, the Brad Pitt character. And he is played by Maury Hamilton, who you might remember as the mayor from Jaws, which I thought was kind of interesting.
That is very interesting.
And yeah, it brings up the whole fact that Maury Hamilton must be playing Mr. Death in Jaws because he gets a lot of people killed in that series or in that movie. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
But
he didn't say close the sidewalks.
No. He said, we're opening the beaches and we're going to let little kids get eaten.
No.
He has a penance for killing kids and things he's in, apparently.
Well, he was pushed to kill a kid in this particular respect, but or so he says.
So crazy.
Yes.
So I did take a little bit of notes for this one, which I should have done to begin with, but in the last episode. But like I said, it opens with Serling's narration. We see Robbie the robot, which is of course Lost in Space. I think Robbie the robot's from Lost in Space.
Yep, that he is. He also appeared in a couple of other B movies kind of throughout that era. Like he was kind of a stand-in robot for a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he's basically like they found him in a warehouse and he's like, oh, we'll just use him in everything. It's kind of like what Star Wars does now.
Yeah, exactly.
But basically this episode revolves around a guy named Lou Bookman, really interesting name, played by Ed Wynn, who is a really sweet individual. He's one of those people you would see on the side of the street selling you a watch, but would be so persuasive in his selling that you just couldn't get enough of him. But his main problem is he's gone through most of his life kind of being poor. He's lived in the same room for pretty much all of his life.
Yep.
20 years, or is that what it was?
Yep.
And he talks to the same people every day. He's always hangs around the kids. For some reason, he keeps giving kids all the free stuff, giving them like free robots and stuff like that. And I'm like, this is probably why you have no money. You're just giving free stuff away,
And then he
So,
repairs it too, as we see a little bit later. So.
yeah. It's like charge this kid like $20 or something. I mean, it is a 50. It's charging him like a quarter. I'm kidding.
You need to have your heart like melted a little bit there, I think.
Maybe.
You're like I guess you are 84 years old then if we go by what your stuff says.
Damn kids.
Get off
kids.
my lawn, you damn kids. See, this is why I have the halo and you don't.
I'm like Kenny from South Park. Little boy, you going to hell? Oh man. But we see the opening to Lou Bookman. Like I said, he's a good-natured individual and he has a problem. He finishes up for the day and there is Murray Hamilton's Mr. Death in his apartment. Now, I don't know how you feel about the character in hindsight or in general, but I think it's a very interesting take on a character of Death himself. Death is one of those characters that in generality there is no real thing that is Death. There's no personification of who he is. It's just what happens to us when we die. But giving him a personification, like a personified of guy in a black suit with a tie who holds a notebook or notepad, who basically has to follow a timetable, a time set, or as he puts it, time will go out of flux and stuff like that. So I guess the question is, when we first see Mr. Death, not even on the steps, but when we first see him in the apartment, and he's explaining everything to Lou at first, and Lou's like, I don't know, it's kind of out there with the information. Mm-hmm. What's your overall feeling of his character when you first meet him?
When you first meet him, he comes off as very kind of like official and very much like very strict, I guess kind of a gent, he follows the rules. There's no room for anything. But then you get Lou talking to him and it kind of breaks the ice. And, like when they're talking through the various reasons that, someone could gain, like an extension to not have to die. I think the fact that Lou didn't, like, it's kind of an interesting thing because Lou didn't, and I guess I'm jumping ahead just a little bit, but Lou, he tried to like weasel his way out of it, but it was done in a very straight, like an honest way. He's like, well, I don't have any, loved ones around, I'm not, it was, everything he did, he was trying to be honest about it, even though it was exaggerated. He's like, oh, I've never ridden in a helicopter. I've never seen, whatever the group of, whatever tribe it was.
It's really strange. It's really interesting because the one thing we always talk about when we get near the end of our life, especially when we know we're going to go at some point, is how we didn't accomplish things that we wanted to do. For instance, if I went through my whole entire life and I never got out of the country, I'm gonna be like, one day I'm gonna be like, oh man, I wish I had gone to England or Italy. It's that type of mentality where you realize that your last days are coming up, and you see something like this and you see the personification of Death himself. He's coming here, he's holding out his hand. He's like, I'm taking you with me. We're going to go to some other place. Who knows where. He's like, I'm going to take my suitcase with me, but we're going to go to some other place. And it's just, it's a scary, you can tell on Lou's face that he's like scared to death, that he doesn't want to go. He doesn't feel like he's made that so-called perfect pitch, which when I said one for the Angels, I thought about when he said perfect pitch, I'm like, is he talking about he wants to pitch for the Los Angeles Angels? I mean, and I realized the Angels haven't been, a team yet, but yeah, when you first see Death, he's very straightforward. He's very formal. He's not like, William Sadler, or he's kind of like William Sadler's Death in Bill and Ted, where instead of playing games, he's like, you're going to blah, blah, blah. But what makes this, God.
Oh, I was going to say, I really wanted to see Mr. Death play Twister or chess with Ed Wynn. I think that would have been hilarious.
That would have been ridiculously funny.
Oh my God,
that would have broken people's brains.
Yeah.
Oh man, especially when they made I think they made, didn't William Sadler's character, wasn't he a German descent Death or something like that?
I think
didn't
so.
he talk
Yeah.
like he was, It's so funny.
I mean, it was based off of Seventh Seal, but that's another thing. So
Yeah. It's funny that like in this episode, most things when you see death, and this is even like The Simpsons or Family Guy, death is always in this like cloak with this scythe, and it's all he's usually wearing. Sometimes he wears shoes, sometimes he doesn't. But in here, Rod Serlings personifies death as just a man in a suit, just doing his daily duty. He's like the guy that comes out of like Beetlejuice, just in the workforce. And it feels like such a sad, depressing job that he's like, I gotta take another person away. And he goes and has his death beer later on and talks to his death wife and little death kids, and it's like, yeah, this guy sold me a whole bunch of shit. Now we have a whole bunch of ties and all this nonsensical nonsense. But
hey, he could use another tie or two. I mean, you got to have a little bit of distraction from the black. I will say,
Exactly.
I think for the time, like he wanted what I took it as. For that time, you think about your basic work, your basic guy that does an office job, the black suit, the black tie, the white shirt, the very, very straight hair. I'm assuming that's probably pretty kind of an everyman. So that's probably what they were kind of going for with Death, was they wanted him not to stand out in a crowd, maybe.
Yeah. And of course, the young girl doesn't see him when she comes in because she broke her toy after 5 seconds, and
Typical kid.
Death actually reminds me a lot of like, it's gonna sound kind of weird, maybe a little jokish, but
That's okay.
if you ever watch like Pink Floyd's The Wall, or like Another Brick in the Wall, or you watch Joe versus the Volcano, that's what Death seems like to me. He seems like the kind of guy who just goes on his day by day, appointment by appointment, and by the end of this series or this episode, he's done what Joe has done. He's dropped out the volcano, blasted out into the ocean or whatever, and kind of seen a new light. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But like I said, the little kid comes in. Was her name Maggie or whatever her name is, Maggie Polanski? Why they actually gave her a name, I don't know. They should just call her little girl. But she comes in, she the toy broken, all the good stuff. And what's really interesting is, unlike Quantum Leap, she doesn't see the invisible man. She doesn't see the owl who has is his guide, Sam's guide from Quantum Leap. It's the girl doesn't see anything. Usually which makes it kind of interesting, because when you're a kid or a dog or an animal or something like that, you usually see the ghost, or it's been not, I don't know if it's true or not, but they have theories that kids, because they're so innocent, they see things like that. And for her not to see death is really a fascinating, kind of interesting concept, until she gets hit by the car later on.
Right.
So I don't know if you thought about that when you're watching. These are the kind of things I think about when I'm watching. I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So I don't know if that came up to you, or
I'm assuming that they probably didn't have her see death from the get-go, because of the fact of how the things go for her later. If she could see him before and then see him later, I think that's probably, it would have been a little weird, just from that perspective. And as far as the name thing, I think it probably, because no other kid there obviously had a name. Since she was special from the start, you can tell that there's something that's going to happen with her one way or the other. It's like, so many extras, like it's man in crowd or man at bar or chicken bathtub. It's I don't know why. That's just what I
chicken bathtub. I like that.
But that if someone has a name like Jorge, and it's, even though they might have like no lines, but they're always in the background of a shot, I'm sure that probably plays in. That gives you the significance of where they're at as a character.
It's actually funny, because when Lou is sitting on the steps with the kids, he hands 2 toys to a boy and girl, and I'm thinking those other kids are like, "What the hell's my toy at? You gave 2 toys out, and the rest of us are, what are we, broke assholes? I mean, like, what's going on here?"
Well, they were supposed to do something with ice cream later, so I'm assuming that those kids probably wouldn't get ice cream. They'd have to eat their toys or something.
Eat the toy.
Get your daily intake of plastic, damn it.
So with that said, we move into the point where Mr. Death is like, we don't, as you said earlier, we sometimes make exceptions if it's something really big. And Lou, trying to get out of the situation, is coming up with every scenario possible. He's talking about, oh, I want to fly. And then he comes up with, he wants to create the ultimate pitch, one for the angels, which is what the episode title is. And in the process of everything, Death is like, nope, that's not gonna work. You're gonna go at midnight. And then and then some reason Death grows a conscience, which is really interesting and strange, which I thought was a little on the goofy side, but I can see why Lou started to have an effect on him. You stand around somebody long enough, they're gonna rub off in you in some form or fashion, I guess you can say. And he, as you aware, see, he offers him the ability to find that perfect pitch, but Lou takes it too far. And as we see when they're going to, actually, I think that's probably my favorite scene in this episode, is when he's walking down the steps and Death is trying to explain to him that he has to do this now. He doesn't have unlimited ability. And as we hear, the little girl gets hit by a car, somehow takes a very long time to die, or she's taking a long time to, she's like talking to him and stuff like that. But I mean, what was your overall take on that portion of that episode?
Well, when Lou talks about the perfect pitch and all that stuff, and then it feels like when I first saw this, and even because it's been a while since I've seen it, I was sitting there watching it, and it's like, oh, Death kind of comes off as like this, he knows all the tricks, like he's seen everything, but yet Lou kind of subverts him and kind of pulls a gotcha on him basically. And then he shuts the door in his face and he's like, shit, he got me. So then he's walking down the stairs and he's like, hey, you can't do that. That's not the way this works. I'm, still going to take you. And then to prove the point, you go outside and, and Maggie is hit by a car, which a couple things on the car thing. Why do people always move people that have been hit by a car? It's like, don't move the damn necks. Why would you do that? That's just, and then later, like, oh, she's gonna, we don't know if she's gonna survive the night. She's a very sick girl. It's like, why isn't she in a neck brace? It's like she's not suffering from a cold or pneumonia. She got hit by a freaking truck.
You think he was hearing like a full body cast and something like that,
I understand that for the 50s, you couldn't show someone in, like blood and guts and all that stuff, but like you could put her like, I don't know, in a hot, I don't know. I guess things were probably done differently back then, but I just like the verbiage that the doc used just didn't really work very well.
Yeah, it's just it's a really, I mean, it's like you said, it's the 50s, late 50s going early 60s. Dennis Hopper hasn't taken LSD yet, so we haven't fully hit the 60s. But that's always been my quote unquote problem with the series, is the unwillingness sometimes to push the boundaries of what you're willing to do. And it's just the nature of the time and when it came out. But it's like, like I said last week, you can really tell the sense that Rod Serling wants to push the envelope, but he's so hamstrung by, here's a United States that can't handle a little bit of violence or a little bit of nudity, because it will cause the parents to go outrage. And
I can see it. I mean, you're talking about a kid. You're talking about an 8-year-old.
No, I know.
In this particular respect, I can see why they kept it. They gave the fact, they implied the fact that it happened. And, I mean, look at Hitchcock, his best stuff was, for as great as Psycho is, I would argue that his best stuff are the things that imply violence or imply trauma more than actually showing it. And in this case, the damn thing is called One for the Angels. You don't want it. Maggie is a means to an end more than she's an actual,
she's not really what you call a character. She is a kind of plot device in the end. She doesn't really have any purpose outside of forcing Lou to kind of come to terms with the fact that he is coming to the end of his life, basically, which is what makes it really sad to think about. But it's like one of your favorite Hitchcock movies, Rope, where it's never said, it's never shown that the guy was killed, but it's implied that he's in the cabinet. It's implied that they killed him and they put him in that little cabinet. So it's the same type of thing, I guess you could say, when you talk about like 100%. Hitchcock and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Less is more in some cases. And my issues are very surface level. I mean, it's grand scheme, those are not things. I mean, we're putting more emphasis on it than they probably did at the time, and they might have written more in, but the idea was that It was about Maggie, but it wasn't about Maggie. She has the same amount of significance as his suitcase, as far as like it plays an important role in the story, but it's not the main story.
Right. The overall justification for this episode is, what do we do when we come to the end of our days? How do we view our life? Did we do everything we wanted to do, and were we satisfied with how our life ended? And that to me personally is the overarching theme of this episode. Is did we accomplish what we wanted to do? Are we happy? Did you travel the world? Did you become famous? Did you do what you do? Were you happy just being a guy in the street who never really succeeded, or did you want more? And that's basically what Lou wanted. He wanted to be the guy who had that one significant moment in his life where he, like he says to Mr. Death, he wanted to open up the heavens, which is, think about Apple or Amazon or any of these big companies. They had that one moment that created such a cataclysmic event that caused the heavens or the skies to open, that everybody took notice. And that's what he wanted here. And when he sees when he sees the girl dying, and not to get like too depressing, but when he sees the girl dying and he's trying to adhere to death, and Death's like, you made your choice, this is the choice that you make, you have to accept the choice. And you see that he's like, here's what I'll do, let me have that one pitch, I'll pitch it to you. And as we see what happens, he makes Death basically buy his whole entire lot, which I thought was hilarious, because you see like all the sweat coming down Murray Hamilton's face and stuff like that. But what do you think about like all that and all that good stuff, with what happens to him and the overall arching story? And
Well, I agree with you, and I don't agree with you. I think he did, like, initially he wanted that one big pitch, but I think in the end of it, it was more about the sacrifice that he made for Maggie. It was taking, he got off scot-free. He could have let her die. He could have gone on living and not worried about it. But it wouldn't, you're talking about the life of a kid versus the life of someone in their late 60s. He, for all of the things that he could have done with all that time that he gained for himself, he, sacrificed himself so she could live. He held, because the thing with the big pitch was, it wasn't so much for his glory, it was to hold off Death until after midnight. So Death, couldn't collect. And
that's true.
And it saved her. And in the grand scheme, that's what raised him in the eyes of, he even offered his soul there at the end. Like, he pitched him ties, and he started just listing off products like thread and sunscreen and all this stuff. And then he's like, the last thing is a one of a kind item, my soul. You have me as your servant to do whatever you want. And then all of a sudden midnight strikes, Death misses out on getting Maggie, and he's like, yeah, you like that?
He won the game of Battleship.
He did.
You know what the best part about the ending though is, I don't know if you noticed, but he says to Death, he's like, he points up, am I going there? And Death's like, yep, you are, because the good natured spirit of what he did. Because I think, because what I don't believe in the whole like death and life after death and stuff like that, but I think what they were also maybe trying to go for is, maybe his soul was maybe not as clean after he tricked Death into agreeing to that one moment, and then at the end he kind of made himself into a more positive light. I don't know if you agree with that at all, but that's kind of why when you see him point up to the sky, it's like Death is like, yeah, so
yeah. And I'm not sure, I guess he always had a good rapport with kids, and I guess depending upon where your mind sits on what would qualify one to be able to go to heaven or hell, they really didn't talk about it before that. But he lived a pretty small life. He was just a guy on the street, but he was always good to the folks around him. And it's even said in the end prologue, or the epilogue, kind of, that he was a good guy that people loved. So I don't know if it was so much a question of that. Obviously tricking Death would put you on not the side of the angels as much. But I think that the fact that he asked, I think, showed that he was truly ready. to go.
Because it actually says it in it says in the plot synopsis. It says he looks to Death, adding hopefully up there, and Death replies, "Up there, Mr. Bookman, you made it." So I kind of think that maybe kind of signifies that he, as you said, accepted it, as well as realized that he made the right choice and just doing what he needed to do to let her live and stuff like that. So
Exactly. He chose the side of
Right.
angels.
Exactly. Can you imagine if he hadn't, everything hadn't like worked out? You see like the ending of like Cabin in the Woods where all the creatures start coming out of the ground and shit. I mean,
All of a sudden, all the
maybe
rocket robots start attacking, and they're like, they pin him down like Gulliver's Travel style. And
this is actually the episode that breaks out the whole Twilight Zone universe, where that's why the gremlins on the side of the plane, and you have the nickel thing, and you have the aliens start messing with the people in Maple Street. And it's all because Lou decided he was going to wait till after midnight to make Death realize. So
he created several paradoxes right then and there.
exactly, several multiverses.
No.
But
does that explain why Burgess Meredith appeared in so many episodes?
Maybe he may be the watcher, the guy who is the central focal point. Oh,
there you go. I like it.
Oh man. But the episode closes with Louis J. Bookman, age 60-ish. Although the nice thing about this, and they're walking away, it's similar to like Casablanca.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just waiting for the cigarette to be pulled out, and this is the start of a new friendship or some shit.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that they were like, you never know if he can sell stuff to folks up there. I think that's so great. It's just
yeah, exactly.
It's got that cheeky kind of ending, and I don't know. I'd like to think that. Oh, good.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say I think I think from the start, like when Death, when that facade cracked on Death, and he kind of saw Lou as someone that was a little different. Like the fact that they kind of went off and did their thing, I'd like to hope that maybe they, were partners and stuff and did stuff,
It's also funny because I expected like their personas to be like Field of Dreams where they disappear, but they just kept walking into the night. So that was kind of interesting. It's like I'm like, aren't you guys dying? Aren't you dead? Walk off like the Field of Dreams, look back. Is this heaven? No, this is Iowa.
Technically, I think it was New York, but
oh, is this heaven? No, this is the New York. Damn it! Get your hot dog and pizza.
Damn it! I prefer Chicago style pizza. All of a sudden, a cornfield appears in the middle of like downtown New York, stopping traffic.
All of a sudden, you see Lou turn back, and it's actually Joe Pesci. What do I look like? A pitchman to you? What am I selling you? Robbie the Robot's here? What the do you think I'm doing? Jesus.
I kept thinking too, like they called him Mr. Death, and all I could think, Mr. Death was my father. Just call me Death.
That's so good.
Very much.
The closing narration: Louis J. Bookman, age 60-ish, occupation pitchman, formerly a fixture of the summer, formerly a rather minor component to a hot July, but throughout his life, a man beloved by the children and therefore a most important man. Couldn't happen, you say? Probably not in most places, but it did happen in the Twilight Zone. And it's interesting because it starts out, here's a man, this is what he does, and then in the end it's like a eulogy. It's like, here was a man, this is what he did, this is how important he was. And it's kind of I want to say a little heartwarming, because a lot of times when you hear about a eulogy, when you're at a wake or a funeral, there's this point where they talk about the person. They're like, yeah, this man or woman did this, blah, blah, blah. They were good nature. They were good, good to people, or at least hopefully they were good to people. They, tried very hard. And that's what it feels like here, where it's a man who, even though he was just a pitchman, he was just a guy selling Robbie the Robot toys, in the end, he was very important to the people around him, and therefore, as he said, a most important man. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It really sets the tone of who this character was as a guy, even though going off to his final wherever, he was still a guy that's always going to be remembered as the man that, loved the people around him, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think that's a good synopsis for it. And I didn't think about the eulogy thing, but it is pretty right on.
Yeah. I mean,
And
most of the time it's Rod Serling going, this guy or this woman or this robot, it didn't know what it was doing with itself. Be careful what you wish for. You're in the
Oh,
Twilight Zone or something like that.
absolutely. But he has
So,
such a way with
yeah.
words, like the way it's poetic. It kind of both introduces you and finishes stuff off, and he does it so well.
Yeah, it's interesting that I don't know if a lot of TV shows were doing this at the time, but just having narrations really helps the sense of the viewer who might be a little pondering things. It helps them maybe get some kind of conclusion or some kind of a way to settle what they think about the episode, a way for them to kind of move past the episode to the next episode. So it's really interesting that he would go on there and talk about, here's this and this is what you can ponder about. Was say, a man loses glasses, had all the time in the world, and now he has nothing, and it makes you kind of ponder, certain aspects of maybe your life, or how you view somebody else's life. And that's a very poignant thing to do, a very poignant thing to say. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know how, if any other shows really did this that were not news station shows or something like that, but it's a really kind of interesting way to do an opening and closing to your show, and to give some insight into how you view the world, I guess. That makes sense.
Of the ones that I know, like you always had the OG Star Trek did that, like with the and they did Stardate da 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 and gave you the intro. I mean, Batman, regarded that was quite a few years later, did that. I guess I didn't watch enough like stuff from that era, but I would think that because this is not the same characters week to week, you'd almost have to have something just to give you a little bit of background on what's upcoming. You only had 25 minutes to tell a story, and not that these stories were, the most in-depth of things, but you'd probably need a little something extra to make sure people understood what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's 100% possible. As it's a way to get yourself into the story, have some kind of context at the beginning, have a little bit of context at the end. Like I said, to me personally, I always felt the ending narration was a way to ponder maybe something about the episode that maybe could be useful in your life in some form, or viewing this person in a specific light, trying to think about the whole idea and concepts. And I don't know, it's really interesting, to be honest.
Oh, very much so. Well, and I think like we've been talking theories and things like that. Rod Serling, if he was still around, would could say I meant this or I meant that. But it does, it gives you a base to know how you feel about it, how you interpret it versus what someone else sees.
Yeah, it's true. Very true. Like I said, theories and ideas are different from person to person, or at least I attempt to tell people that when I do an ending explains, but they don't really listen. But
it's a joy of people.
But yeah, overall, I think it's a very down to earth, very sweet episode. I think it's very somber, and it's overall narrative of a guy who's basically going to his final conclusion. But it has some things along the way that you can interpret as something you maybe, to me personally, like I said, I know you had your little bit of disagreements with it, which is perfectly all right. There's nothing, like I said, that's perfectly all right.
Them's fighting words right there. I bring it on. Come on over here.
No, but like I said, what you were saying actually made a lot of sense. But I just I like simple facts of looking at a story like this, and you have an interpretation of it and I have interpretation of it. Like I said, I think it's the whole idea of how do we view ourselves in the end, and what do we do as a last ditch effort to try to save ourselves, but realizing that maybe we can do something to save someone else. And
I
don't know, yeah, in the end it's about what we do as our final moments that affect the people around us.
100%, very much so.
But with that said, that is the episode. It's once again, it's not like the most complex episode, but it has a lot of meaning, a lot of grace behind it, and has some great performances. Like I said, The conversations between Death and Lou were absolutely fantastic. The little girl stuff it's more of a plot device than anything. I'm not blaming the little girl because she was just given the direction she was given. She's probably, was like, oh, mommy, I get to be in a TV episode, and I get run over by a car.
She's probably got the biggest trailer of all of them. Demanded like only green M&Ms.
He's like, mommy, they wouldn't give me my peanut butter and jelly sandwich, so I threw a temper tantrum, and then I got hit by a car, and that's how I got written off the series. And the series was supposed to be about me. Man.
Damn old man. I will say one of the real quick thing, and this is kind of random, but I love the fact that it struck like a minute past midnight, and like the little Robbie the robot on her side table started like walking around when she wakes up.
Oh,
it's like everything kind of came back to life.
That's actually ironically funny too, because in I don't think Spielberg did this on purpose, but in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when the aliens started arriving and they take the little kid, all the little toys and stuff start moving on their own. And I think there's actually a Robbie. There's a robot that looks like Robbie the robot that's actually in that scene, if I remember right.
God, it's been so long since I've seen it.
No, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember the like robots and the fire engine and stuff like that. And as we know, Spielberg is very much into homages to other directors like Serling and I don't know, Hitchcock, and Kubrick, which he was a big friends with and stuff like that. So in the end, what is your overall feeling? Like I said, I told you kind of what I felt. I liked the episode a lot. I think it was, a much marked improvement over the last week's episode, because I think the characters are much more interesting. I think Maury Hamilton as Mr. Death is actually one of the highlights of the episode and one of the standout characters of the Twilight Zone, because I think it's just a very unique take on the Death character himself. But overall on the episode, you said you liked it, but after rewatching it, what is your overall feelings?
I since we're doing this, you have a tendency to kind of look a little bit deeper, and obviously like small things, and it's obviously plot driven convenience, the way that the little things go with the little girl. But I gained a lot of respect for this, like the back and forth between Death and Lou, and kind of that whole back and forth. And I mean, it was kind of a battle of wits to see who could outsmart who. And, in the end, they walk away as friends, and, Lou kind of embraces what's going on. He doesn't fear it. He sees Death as a friend, and they go forth together. And I don't know. I think there's a lot to be learned from that particular aspect of things. And there's the idea of sacrifice and putting others before yourself. And I think that there's a lot of good messages in here. And I think all of, there's a very few Twilight Zone eps that don't have some kind of a message, but this kind of message always stands out as something kind of special. So
yeah, it's one thing that's interesting is these episodes that deal with like two characters as major characters in the episodes are some of the most fascinating, because for instance, a game of pool is all about a man who thinks he's better having to come to terms with he's just another person in the mix of everything else. And that's what I really like about episodes like this. It's just you give two characters a script, very pared down. It's not like the monsters are doing Maple Street or to eat man. Was it to
serve mankind?
To serve man things. We already know what happens. But it's a chance. It's a chance for just two. Yeah, exactly. It's just a chance for two characters, two individuals to have a sparring match, back and forth with really interesting, intriguing dialogue, and I really respect that. And those are some of those episodes are some of the favorites that end up coming up in the series. So overall, like I said, great episodes. So with that said, we'll end the episode with, do you believe that this episode was better than the last episode? Yes or no?
I think so. I think it hits on a different level than the last episode. Like the last episode was, one guy facing internal fears. I guess this one does too, to some extent. It kind of covers a fear of death, a fear of, what lies next, a fear of change to some extent. But yeah, this one, I mean, the message in this, like you say, it's obviously more complex than the last episode. But yeah, right. I mean, this has always been a fave. So, I mean, by virtue of that alone, it's one that I'm going to say, yeah, I really appreciate this one on a deeper level than what I do with Where Is Everybody?
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. It's a much more fascinating, much more interesting story to me personally than the last episode, which is not taken away from the last episode because it was still a great episode.
Oh yeah.
I just think overall the two characters are much more in depth and intriguing, I guess you could
Yes.
say. So,
Very much so.
but with that said, that is pretty much it. Next episode will be, of course, Mr. Denton on Doomsday, which is their, like you said, their first Western. Has Martin Landau in it, which is cool. As I see Doug McClure, Gene Cooper,
All kinds of
and I think-
people.
yeah, Bill Irwin. I think there's some names you might recognize, but it's definitely Martin Landau because he is a pretty well-known actor that passed away recently. So,
Yeah.
but with that said, I think that'll do it on this episode, One for the Angels. Triv, with that said, where can they find you if they want to find your content?
All right. Well, I just uploaded a new video called The Stuff. You can find me over at Trivial Theater here on YouTube. You can also find me on Twitter at trivia_chick.
Awesome. And like I said, big deal. Hopefully I don't, fall in a bathtub again or fall in a bridge or something like that. And end up in
No,
the Twilight
please don't
Zone,
do that. We just started this thing.
I know. Hey, that's why you have Jacob coming up. You can have him take over if I fall off the bridge.
No, you
I'm
did. This
just
is
kidding.
you dork. Jeez.
I know.
And
I'm
massive
kidding.
congratulations, even though the video that you were figuring out was going to be your 1000th video. It's memorable, I guess.
Yeah, it's just ironic. It's ironic that the video that is your like big video for that, the big milestone is the one movie that you don't know if it's going to be any good or not. So we'll see how that works out. But
that just means you can rip into it extra hard if it's bad, or praise it to high heavens if it's good.
there you go. It's exactly true. 1000 episodes. This movie sucks.
Woo!
No.
It's one for the devils, one for the garbage pile if it's bad, or one for the angels if it's good.
There you go. Anyways, you can reach me at Movie Emporium on Twitter, as well as my YouTube channel, which is of course Movie Emporium, where I have all the content that I have and wares and whatnot. I also sell shirts and t-shirts at, I don't remember I have to remember what the site is, but I have not sold anything yet. So,
or is it Redbubble?
I think it's like Spring. I think it's called Spring now.
Ah, okay,
but
cool.
yeah, it's Movie Emporium for spring or whatever it is. So, but with that said, we'll see you on the next episode of Twilight Zone, which is Mr. Denton on Doomsday. I forgot this already. But with that said, we will see you later in the Twilight Zone. Peace out, everyone.